All right, y'all, we back out here again getting 3 degrees buffer. I'm Godiaco Corey Johnson, and I just have a few observations I want to touch on from my class today. What day is today? Doesn't matter, because it's not going to post the day that this was anyway. You probably heard that ankle pop. But anyways, just a few really cool notes on this. Learning to speak people's languages, right? When you look at the Gospels, having multiple Gospels, I never thought about it in this sense. Because we're always taught that the different gospels were geared towards different types of people, different groups of people back then, which is true, but it's not the complete picture. See, think of legal terms, right? That's what's really going on here. The Bible is on trial, and when it comes to the story of Christ, there's a lot of people who question whether or not he was real or existed and all that kind of stuff. But when you have 4 different gospels that are telling essentially variations of the same story and telling you who this person is, each one of those books becomes a witness that helps to verify and prove consistency to the story and to the record as we have it written. Think about the Bible gets enough grief right now in terms of being called disharmonious, inaccurate, all these other different things. Imagine if there was only one gospel and literally only one book that told the story of Jesus. How much more ridiculous would it seem? So having gospels, having 4 different variations of stories that are alluding to the same things does a whole lot more in defense of the truth of the story, as opposed to just having one narrative alone. So all the people out there who are trying to say, 4 different stories, like go to a basketball game, go to the NBA draft, which happened last night. Now I'm telling you what day this is. And, pick 4 of the different guys who got drafted and have them tell you about their experience. All of them are going to tell you something different. Even the twins that got drafted back to back, they're going to have different experiences, even though they were at the same exact event at the same exact time. Okay? So get out of here with this nonsense that 2 people at the same event can't see things and interpret things differently. All right? That's very disingenuous, to say the least. You don't sound intelligent for making an argument like that. So it is what it is. All right? But anyways, all that aside, we get the point that the story is there and it's able to be even more verifiable because there's multiple witnesses, right? That's the point. Within that, you have the language that's being used to reach very specific people. So it's so multifaceted, the purpose of these different gospels, the reason the stories are laid out the way that they are, and the writers choose the different language that they do. They're accomplishing so many things at once, which is pretty amazing. A couple of the things, we look at the term Son of God. I think that's in Luke. And yeah, he's writing primarily to the Gentiles as a part of his thing. But the reason he's using that isn't just to identify his relationship to God. What he's doing is really speaking the language of the people in the Greco-Roman world, because they were used to hearing that statement before. Son of God was kind of the surname that they would use, or part of the royal name for whoever the emperor of Rome was. So it'd be Augustus, son of God, Caesar, son of God, Tiberius, son of God. That's how they identified them. So by using language like this, Luke is speaking their language to say something very specific about Jesus, not just the fact of his relationship to God. All right. He's establishing the primacy of the position of Christ in the minds of his listeners, because that's the language they speak. Very similar also to when the terms of father are being used. The emperor was also considered the father of the fatherland. Right. So when you're talking about our Father and Jesus is talking about God as his Father, as the Son of God, it speaks back again into the language that they used during that time in the Greco-Roman world. And don't forget, the time of Christ is right there in the time of the Roman Empire. All right. So it all fits in perfectly, and it makes sense why he would say things this way. He's trying to establish how to properly view God based on their language and how they understood their relationship to the emperor. All right. So really dope. But then we got to a little bit later something that to me was, I think, maybe even more impactful. I'll say it this way. There's been a lot of things I've had questions about in my Christian experience. And the path of missions has really answered a lot of those questions for me. When I think about how out of place that I've felt within Christianity sometimes, and some of the ideas I've had, people thinking how random it is that I want to go in another country and serve for a number of years and come back and study the things I'm studying. All of these different things, I've had kind of questions along the way, and a lot of them have been confirmed through the mission experience out in the field and here now as I'm continuing my education with it. And a couple of these things I've made some YouTube shorts about, so check those out. But I'm going to expand on them in a little bit more detail here so you get an even fuller context of kind of what we spent 5 hours in class today talking about. All right. So one of them is that Jesus didn't come down here to give us more information. When I think of Adventism and within Christianity, generally speaking, we're known to be like intelligent and about our business, about the book. Even respected within other religions because we're people that are by the book. And because of that, it's become our calling card. And it's become our calling card at the expense of the experience that the knowledge is supposed to give us, right? So instead of me viewing good Christianity necessarily as going and being a certain way to other people, it comes down to how fast can I go through Bible swords? I've talked about this before. How many of the fundamental beliefs do I know? Do I know all the books of the Bible? Do I know all the right answers to the right questions? Do I know the genealogies? Do I know the stories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? The Christian experience ends up being based on knowledge and how much I accumulate. So therefore, to be a better Christian or more in touch with spirituality, I have to learn more. Now, when you look at the example of Christ, it's pretty clear that even though he was saying a lot of things, he wasn't simply about bringing us more information. Sure, he had things that he wanted us to learn and things to understand, but it wasn't supposed to stay on just a knowledge level. So think about this, right? For all the sermons that Jesus gave and all the stuff that he did, there's not a single record of him asking any one of his followers or listeners to write anything down. In fact, in Luke's gospel, and this is different from the Old Testament where you have prophets who are saying the word of the Lord to me, or God told me to say this, or God told me to write this. It's different with the gospels. You have Luke who says, I'm taking this upon myself because all these other records are out there. I want to make an accurate one of the stories. And it's comparable to the other gospels, which is how we know, at least in part, it's valid. I'm skipping over a lot of information in history and facts right there with that statement. But the bottom line is you had people opting in to share this message, not necessarily because Jesus asked them to, right? Bottom line being, Jesus didn't want to just share information for information's sake. He was trying to introduce a way of life, not just the idea of growing my knowledge, but growing my life experience, the way that I'm supposed to live. How do I know this? Well, when you look at the Old Testament, you see all the rules and regulations that people sum up as a part of Old Testament life. You see people questioning Jesus about this all the time, and he ends up telling them, you know what? Yeah, we have all the law and we have all the prophets, but I sum all of this up in 2 commands: to love God with everything you got and to love your neighbor as yourself. So I think there's a spider up there. I'm not a fan of spiders. Man, I had a gummy worm while I lit that thing up. I'm gonna have to clean that later. But it would have been easy for Jesus to tell his disciples, hey, get some scribes. We're gonna write this thing down. We're gonna share it with the entire world, and the mission will be complete, right? Go ye therefore, send the scroll, send the documents. But that wasn't his purpose. He wanted the people to go ye therefore. Jesus' followers, the people who were listening to the message, were to become the message, right? If you've heard the statement, they will know we are Christians by our love, not by our knowledge. That's not how the statement goes. But a lot of times today, we think that being a good Christian is being able to prove what we believe in, to win a debate, to trump someone in a discussion, to know more about the Bible than the next person, so that way we can get through the text and show our points even better and deeper. But that's not what Jesus was about. He wasn't trying to multiply scrolls and documents. He was trying to multiply life and love, a way of living, a way of being. That's what it was really about for him. So I can only speak to Adventism because I am an Adventist Christian. But when you look at the different, we don't have a creed. Creeds are set in stone and unable to change. We have a statement of beliefs. So it gives us a little bit of flexibility in terms of studying and learning new things as well, okay? And Adventist Christianity is probably a lot younger, considerably, maybe not even 200 years old, if that, 1844, 1944, yeah. Not even 200 years old compared to other things like Judaism or some other Far East religions, or even Catholicism, Christianity, for that matter. All those things have existed for thousands of years, and this is new. So it makes even more sense to have a statement of beliefs that is open to studying and learning and applying knowledge better. But the reason I say that is because, given what I just said about Jesus and his summing up of all the law and the prophets, we've done a really good job looking through the Bible and say, okay, there's evidence of this belief here. This is something that they were clearly teaching here, but we don't have a doctrine for love. Like actually loving people. We talk about God as love, the implications that we should be love as well, but we don't have a doctrine that says, hey, this is what it means to do this, and this is how we exercise this. This is how we engage in a being of love. And I almost have to ask a question like, why is that? It's not something you can really afford to gloss over, especially if you're hoping it's implied in the things that you believe and the things that you stand for. But as I was listening to people discuss this in class, I took a few notes. And I was able to share those with the class right before class ended. I'm going to share them with you here in this video. So let's see what we got. Living a life of love requires real change. If I keep everything in a head knowledge, then I've already won simply by knowing it, right? That doesn't need to impact the way that I live and operate in my life. As long as I know the right answers, I'm good. I don't need to know how to apply it in any context or circumstances. As long as I have the right answer, I'm good. It reminds me of accounting. I took business in my undergrad, and there were a number of tests where we would memorize all these different formulas and ratios, A equals L plus C, all that stuff. And at least when we were starting, it was very easy to memorize the formula. So if they asked me on a test, what is the general, I forget what the equation is called, but if you ask me what the formula is, I could tell you assets equals liabilities plus equity. Does it mean that I knew how to calculate it? No. Did it mean that I knew how to apply it in a given situation? No. Could I take that information and use it to come up with a good perspective on where a company was financially? No. The application of it wasn't there. I just knew the right answer. Obviously, that's not good enough, right? So choosing to operate on that, it requires real change. It requires getting past just the head knowledge, and it's tougher. A equals L plus E is what? A equals L plus E. That's 5 characters, and I can memorize that, and I know that 10 years after I graduated with this degree that I haven't used since then, but that's besides the point. Bottom line is, the knowledge has not changed my life in any way, shape, or form. But we can't afford to have that happen to us if we call ourselves Christians. So, living a life of love requires me to move. The right answers are not good enough. It has to actually change the way that I choose to live and operate. And if it doesn't, then it isn't really worth me saying I believe in that, because it's not evident in my experience. For example, again, I have the credentials to say that I could go into business and be an accountant. But there's nothing about my life right now that reflects the fact that I know accounting and I know business. Just simply the fact that I told you. You see what I'm saying? So I can tell you all of that, and I can show you that I understand the right answers to certain business and accounting questions. But you haven't seen any evidence of that in my life. So why would you think I'm an accountant or a business person? You wouldn't. For me to actually live in accordance to that knowledge would literally change the way that I'm living right now. It means I would be doing some things that are very different to what I'm doing right now. And that's the point. Living a life of love actually requires me to go and to change. I can't just share my knowledge with you and now because you have the same knowledge you're good. It means that I need to go and live things out among you. And I can't do that in my room here by myself. That's one of the reasons I started up this YouTube channel, so I could talk about these kinds of things. And I guess I should say that's one of the reasons I started recording these videos, because I get to talk about these changes and my experience in putting them into action. So when you start living based on experience instead of knowledge, it is a challenge because it requires you to move. I can learn anything that I want to about the world in the palm of my hand with a cell phone, right? But for me to really experience Rome and the Colosseum, for me to really experience the Great Wall of China, for me to really experience the reefs of Palau, I have to go. Guess what? That costs me something. It can cost a lot. But that experience being lived out is so much different and better than someone who sat in their room and just tells me all the facts that they read up on the place about. It's totally different. And if, when it comes to love, I choose to just deal with my knowledge base on it, there's no challenge there, because I'm able to just stay right here where I am, both physically, spiritually, mentally. I don't have to change the way that I think about love relating to anyone else because I'm stuck here in the same place. But if I choose to go, that's challenging. Because now if I go to Palau, I need to relate it to people there. If I go to China, I need to relate it to people there. If I go to Rome, I need to relate it to people there, in their context, in their language. That's tough. It's a lot of work, and people don't want to do that, if we're being honest. And so it's interesting what this ends up doing, right? If I stay in my same place and just base it on knowledge alone, it becomes suddenly very easy for me to determine who's with me and who's not based on what they know. So I agree to these 28 fundamental beliefs. If that person does too and they agree to it, then cool, we're on the same team. It becomes knowledge-based and not experience-based. Experience-based is very hard to judge. As you can tell from the examples I gave, showing love to someone in China, Rome, or Palau is going to look very different because all of those places speak different languages. Not just the words that are coming out of their mouths, but their culture, their environment, their traditions are different. So love in those contexts is going to look completely different. That's a lot of work to learn those contexts and environments, and then to be willing to take the time to share that. That's getting way out of my comfort zone. And not only if I take the plunge to live a life like that, am I getting way out of my comfort zone, but it makes it a lot more personal. See, when it comes to sharing my ideas, well, if someone doesn't agree with my ideas, then I can just write it off and say, well, you didn't choose to think about things that way. and I can go on and keep it pushing to the next person that I want to share my ideas with. But if I'm living a certain life a certain way and I'm sharing that experience with someone else and they reject it, they haven't rejected a set of ideas that I have. They've rejected me. And we don't like feeling that close to the things that we believe in. I'll say that again. We don't like feeling that close to the things that we believe in. A lot of us will talk this, and this about the things that we believe. And then when it comes to living it out, we're not doing that. Why? Because it's too personal. It's too close. And if people reject the ideas, well, then it is whatever again. But if they reject the things that I'm doing, then they're rejecting me. It's a lot more personal. It hurts more, and I don't want to do it anymore. And then my measurability factor, it seems like I'm failing whether I'm doing what I believe I should be doing or not, which is an incorrect assumption, I think. And so my concluding point on this would be, when you look at Jesus bringing it full circle, not wanting to bring just a better understanding or just knowledge-based living, and wanting to bring more of an experience-based life of love, we see this exemplified in his own story when his life is coming to an end. Ultimately, the story of the Gospels culminates with the rejection of Christ by a group of people. And what you notice is that he takes it very personally. He doesn't just say, well, screw these people. They didn't believe the things that I had to say. He takes it extremely personally that they've rejected him. And not in a bitter sense. He's just sad for them. You have verses that talk about him weeping over Jerusalem, right? You have him on the cross. You have him in Gethsemane almost wanting God to take the experience away from him because he knows it's going to hurt so much being rejected and being, having to go through that experience for the sake of people who he knew most of them were going to reject him. You have him on the cross where they're nailing him to it. They're putting him up and he's saying, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. Those are not the kinds of experiences and things that someone does who is more focused on a knowledge-based way of living and a knowledge-based scale for acceptance. No, those are the responses of people who are giving themselves to the cause that they believe in. Literally, we see that in his case. And that's kind of the thing that we've gotten away from. Maybe part of it is because we don't want to experience the kind of suffering that Christ did. Which, it would be a pretty good reason. I'm not going to say I'm signing up to be thrown on a cross. You know what I'm saying? But I think that I have to realize, regardless of wherever I am in my own experience, that I can't settle for just knowing the right answers anymore. Like, that's not what it really means to be a Christian. Sharing my knowledge, it's not about me saying this, and because I say this, then I am that. It's got to be something about the way that I'm living that lets other people know something about me. Not something that I'm telling to everybody else about what I am, but something that everyone else can see about me. So, and I think we see this in the book of Acts, where the term Christian itself, it didn't come from people following Christ calling themselves Christians. It came from people observing the way that these people lived, the things that they talked about, the things that they did, how they engaged with people, how they went to heal other people. And they said, oh, those people, they remind me of Christ, so we're going to call them Christians. Is that the kind of life that I'm living? I got to set my game up there. Like I said, I'm not a perfect Christian. There's not such thing as a perfect Christian, but we can all improve, and I certainly can as well. So, yeah, it was a pretty good way to end this segment of the class. There's one more week of these classes left. They're going by so fast. A month of intensives, we out here for real. But hey, 3 degrees buffer. We on it. And I will take a step ahead, go to Yakul, and catch you in the next one. So, hope you enjoyed it. Peace.